Hello, and welcome to CO2 and its role in the body, and also how we can change our relationship to it and more so our tolerance to it so that we can have more in the body so that it can do its important tasks to help us thrive. Um, the first thing we need to do, though, is we need to change the way we think about CO2. So when we hear CO2, a lot of people think that it's a waste product. It's something that's killing us. We need to get out of our body at all cost. It's something that's bad for the environment. That's causing climate change, and a lot of people even associate it with carbon monoxide, which can actually kill you. However, CO2 carries many important roles in the body, roles that if we improve our relationship to, again, our tolerance, then we can greatly improve our lives. This handsome man on the right, this is his quote. This is Yendel Henderson. He's well known for discovering a lot of things with gases and did some important stuff for breath work. So, carbon dioxide is the chief hormone of the entire body. It is the only one that is produced by every tissue and cell, and that probably acts on every organ. I thought that was a cool quote from the man. Um, Next, we're going to kind of talk about why we have an intolerance to CO2, what is causing it, and then the important roles that CO2 actually has in our body. And it's probably going to blow your mind slightly how important this molecule is. So, CO2 has many important functions in the body, but in modern society, our tolerance is low due to inactivity, poor diet, and overbreathing. So, uh, all those things kind of feed into each other. Again, these habits and our tolerance are a double-edged sword that cause us to off-gas or remove more CO2 from the body, which makes us more intolerant to it. So, inactivity and poor diet changes pH in the body. It makes our exposure to CO2 less, and so then that causes us to overbreathing to get rid of CO2. But we need to have that tolerance to CO2 in order for us to allow it to be in the body and not to constantly try to get rid of it. This affects so many processes in the body and causes chronic disease. Here are the reasons why we need to improve CO2 tolerance with regular breath training, exercise, and a whole food diet. So, what we're going to do now is go through a few, not even all, of the important tasks and roles that CO2 has and things that it affects, which you again will be surprised how important it is. And first up is a very important one. It's O2 delivery to cells and tissue. So CO2 determines the strength of the bond between oxygen and hemoglobin. Think rust, because within the hemoglobin is iron. So iron and oxygen are what's bound there, and it's a very strong bond. A low CO2 content strengthens the bond between hemoglobin and oxygen. Again, if CO2 is not present, then hemoglobin will not release oxygen. So it becomes more difficult for oxygen to leave the blood and go to cells and working tissue. And this principle is known as the Bohr effect. This principle means that if you were in a state of rest, you can try to get more oxygen by breathing more, but it will result in decreased oxygen released by the blood due to a lower CO2 content. So basically, when we are constantly getting rid of CO2 through mouth breathing, through overbreathing, which is a epidemic as far as I'm concerned, we are lowering our tolerance to it. So anytime that CO2 comes in, it causes the urge to breathe. And when we exercise, it causes the urge to breathe. Think of like when you start to exercise and you're huffing and puffing, CO2 is building in the body and causes the urge to breathe. So that's why we start to huff and puff. Now, when we're in a state of overbreathing, we're in a state of intolerance to CO2, that doesn't allow us to have much in the body, and that doesn't allow us to process or absorb oxygen into the tissues. So we are constantly out of breath. We're tired. We're chronically fatigued a lot of the times, and a lot of other processes are affected by that. Next is how the body compensates from this. So low CO2 results in low usable O2. So immediately what happens is the heart rate and blood pressure increases in order to get more O2 around the body. And this obviously relates to poor health, increased stress, anxiety, and fear. That's not what we want. We don't want high blood pressure and a high heart rate. So this is one way to help lower both of those quickly. And I've seen drops with clients from this style of breath work of like 25 ml per deciliter, whatever it is, in systolic. Restricted, this goes back to the same thing. So now this is heading into the heart and the breath. So when CO2 is low in the body, our passages constrict and make it more difficult for the air and blood to flow. When CO2 is present, the blood vessels vasodilate, they open and allow more oxygen and nutrient-rich blood to flow through the body. CO2 also helps the passages in our lungs to open and relax, allowing us to breathe deeper. So CO2 is a vasodilator. Oxygen is a constrictor. So if you want to see an immediate example of this, take 20 deep hyperventilations. You're off gassing, bringing in oxygen, pushing out CO2. And what happens is you get lightheaded. You get lightheaded because the blood vessels constrict and blood and oxygen are not getting to the brain, and that's why you get lightheaded. So if you want to see it firsthand, that's that. So what else does that feel like when that happens? That feels like a panic attack. That very closely resembles a panic attack. That's why sometimes the transformative breath, the hyperventilation style breath, can be impactful for people with anxiety and stress and depression and all that stuff. Can be really impactful, but it's got to be the right person in your relationship to it. So typically that feeling is very closely related to anxiety, and a lot of people are in that state of overbreathing constantly. So they are constantly overbreathing, and it results in constantly feeling like they're having anxiety attack. So next on the list is a pH balance. Huge one here. So there's a lot of huge ones here, to be honest with you, but CO2 is one of the biggest influences on our pH in our body. And the body is super efficient at managing this. So if the system is off, though, the body will just need to work harder. And when CO2 is low, the blood becomes more alkaline and it directly affects or even halts processes of vitamins and enzymes in the body. This also affects many important metabolic processes that rely on CO2 to function. Having a balanced pH is essential. So having your gases that you breathe that assist this deeply is essential. So foods, again, there's the alkaline diet and all that kind of stuff. That is not as impactful. It can be over time, but the body really closely regulates, and CO2 in your breath is one of the biggest influences. Nervous system regulation. Now, this is probably the biggest one as far as I'm concerned with this program, because our focus is reduction in anxiety and the ability to control our nervous system on demand. And this is why we are using CO2 practices. So low levels of CO2 can cause us to be intolerant to slight increases in CO2 in the blood, which is what we need. And this causes the nervous system to become excited chronically. And again, this results in anxiety, disorders, panic disorders, chronic stress, fatigue, ADHD, and ultimately depression. When we can fully control our nervous system with your breath and with a couple other lifestyle practices, the impact on that is huge. It's life-changing. I know personally, and I've seen it with clients as well. The change is monumental, and this practice is the reason I am doing this program, is because I know it can help so many people. All of these lifestyle habits that we are instilling in this program, with this CO2 practice, with the other breath work, and with the movement and the lifestyle habits, the impact is going to be tremendous on how well you can control your nervous system. Low CO2 literally makes us stupid. So it negatively affects brain function and intellect. For neurons to synapse with brain cells efficiently, the ideal and optimal level of CO2 is necessary. Low CO2 levels make the communication between brain cells more erratic, unstable, and unpredictable, and thus can cause lower IQ and negatively influence our emotional balance as well. So if you are still in school, you're studying, you're creating at work, all these things will be impacted by your breath and by your relationship to CO2. Breathlessness. Now, this is a big one for people who are just out of shape, but also people with asthma. This kind of practice can change, reverse, or cure it. Low CO2 levels cause an increase in breath rate. This means you will feel tired and out of breath from the slightest amount of exercise. Higher CO2 levels will help your respiratory center allow the breathing to stay more normal during exercise, so you can do more exercise more intensely without feeling out of breath. Now, if you are a person, you're an athlete, and you don't really have breathless issues because you're in pretty good shape. If you're not using this kind of practice in your sport, you are greatly putting yourself at a disadvantage and cutting out that edge completely. This is like, you could train exactly the same that you're doing, add in this breath practice, and improve your performance by a pretty large margin. Blood sugar regulation. This one is really cool, and in today's society, very important. Low CO2 causes decreased uptake of glucose from the blood and increases your blood sugar levels. The rate and efficiency at which glucose passes cell membranes and is delivered to cells is regulated by how much CO2 is present. If CO2 levels are optimal, sugar can be burned more quickly and blood sugar levels can be more stable. Lower blood glucose numbers, regular, are related directly to longevity. So, and then the opposite is true for higher levels. Immune system. This one's the long one. Low CO2 disrupts and weakens your immune system, and we need a nice, strong immune system. So those are just a few. Also, I've talked about it, but it wasn't listed in there. But CO2 is the prime driver to our urge to breathe. And I just want to say this beforehand, because when you have a bad relationship to CO2, you are constantly trying to get rid of it, and you are over breathing, and you're mouth breathing, and you're uncomfortable and anxiety, and you feel that state of lightheadedness and disassociation. If you can change your relationship to it, you can literally, on demand, I know from experience, from myself, from my clients, you can change that immediately and change your relationship. Like, all right, I know what this situation is. I just need to change this breath real quick. I need to breathe through the nose. I need to let that nitric oxide go so I can expand the blood vessels and allow blood to flow. Then finally, like I said, for this program, we can fix all this stuff. And this is just one part of the program. This is a huge, huge part of the program, but it's only one part. So the way that we fix this issue with our tolerance to CO2 is by daily breath training, mainly. Using intermittent hypoxia, static apnea, and active apnea. So basically static breath holds, active moving breath holds, and then intermittent hypoxia, which is basically just lowering the amount of oxygen in the blood temporarily, and then exposing ourselves to CO2. Movement, walking 8,000 steps a day is a base. Zone 2, 3 times a week. So zone 2 is relative. You can use your watch and all that kind of stuff and get an estimate of what it is, or your Whoop, your whatever. But you could also just go to an intensity where it's more than walking, but you are able to keep a conversation. And then VO2 max intervals once a week. VO2 max is, you can get it tested if you want to go that route and get your actual VO2 max, or you can use your watch. Has a very generalized and probably not that accurate version, but you can also just do a higher intensity, something that you can maintain for a minute. It can be a sprint, it can be a hard bike ride, but something that's hard to maintain for a full minute, but you can make it a minute. And then go into a recovery, whether it's a jog or a fast walk, for about 3 minutes, and repeat that 4 times. Diet. Now, I said diet has a small influence on pH, but eating whole foods based diet, low processed, high fiber, and hydration are the essentials. And also with diet, maybe occasionally a fast, or if not a fast, I'm concerned with recommending, because we are over fasters nowadays, and we abuse the fast, but they are very effective depending on the person. And you could also just stay in a slight deficit, and it can have similar effect. Lifestyle. So recovery, sleep, hygiene are on the top because they're the most important. Recovery and sleep are huge for all of this stuff, for everything. Everything that we go through, sleep is going to be the most important. Sunlight, hugely impactful, grounding, and contrast therapy. So that is the essentials of what CO2 does in the body. And that isn't even all of it. That is just like a handful of them. There's quite a few more processes that are very important and more in depth. But hopefully you see how important it is. And as we go through this program, we will test it. We'll do our testing that you'll see coming up. We will retest at the end, and all of this stuff is built into it. Everything, the lifestyle, the mindset work,